I'd like to welcome everyone to the first one in a series of meetings that we're hosting here at Shibolet law firm entitled Shibolet's Tomorrow's News. It's the first in a series of virtual events. The first one is going to focus on healthcare. It's going to be discussing trends in various fields, among other things, but not by all means limited to the wake of COVID-19. We've got an amazing cross sections of panelists for everyone to listen to tonight. And with your permission, I'm going to make a quick round of introductions, and then I'm going to let the panelists do most of the talking. I'm going to throw a few questions out there, let me start by getting the presentations out of the way with your permission. I'm just going to go by the order of screens on my screen, which is not necessarily the way it's displayed on your screen. So I'm just going to go right to left. So we have Professor Dr. Boris Hoffman. Hi, Boris. Professor Hoffman is a member of the executive committee of Esculap AG Tuttlingen, Germany, one of the divisions of the B. Braun Melsungen AG. As senior VP, he heads the B. Braun Innovation Hub and Digital Innovation Business Unit, and which makes him responsible for external innovation management, cooperation with startup companies, as well as digital innovation. Hi, Boris. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Professor Joram Weiss Md, who is the director of the Hadassah Hebrew University Medical Center in Keren campus. Previously held the position of chairman of the Department of Anesthesiology and director of the Center for Surgical Critical Care Medicine. Received an MD from the Technion, was numerous faculty appointments, including at the Hebrew University of Hadassah School of Medicine, adjunct associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, joint program of MBA with Stern NYU Business School, LSE, and the Haute École de Commerce. Among his more interesting accolades is his vast experience in both basic and clinical research, including the design and execution of large-scale clinical trials, and his consulting activities with numerous biotech companies in the field of innovation. Next, we have Ms. Galit Zuckerman-Stark, founder and CEO of Medisense Biometrics Limited. Hi, Galit. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Zuckerman brings to Medisense over 20 years of entrepreneurship, management, and engineering experience, both in startups and large corporations. Ms. Zuckerman founded Medisense with a vision to reduce widespread suffering from pain and pain treatment. And today, Medisense sells its product worldwide with Medtronic as its key distributor in Europe. Ms. Zuckerman holds BSc and MSc degrees in electrical and computer engineering, cum laude from Tel Aviv University of Israel. Next, we have Barak Singer. Hi, Barak. Thank you for joining us. He is the CEO of Trendlines Incubators Israel, which is part of the Trendlines Group and invests in innovative medical device companies. Trendlines has a portfolio of over 35 medical companies, had 9 exits to date, including a fairly recent one during 2020. And then we have the esteemed Omer Shalit Cohen, who is VP Chief Transformation Officer in Israel Site Leader. He's been serving as Change Healthcare's Israel's site leader since 2005, founded Change Healthcare's Innovation Center in 2018, and his prior experience includes venture capital, biz dev, and product management roles. Omer holds a BSc in computer science and an MBA and MA in conflict resolution. So thank you very much for joining us today. And let me start with a softball, which is, and this is one of the things that my marketing department have been telling me, just ask this, make sure you ask this question. What do you think the experience, a patient experience, is going to be in 20 years from now in a way which is substantially different from today? And what do you think your role is in helping us get there? And if I could be so bold, it would help if each of you also gave a couple of words about where they're coming from so we can get a better context of your response. Shall we say ladies first? Galit, would you like to start?
I'll first unmute. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. So great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Great to be in this inspiring panel. Good to see you all. Well, medicine 20 years from now is what we see here in the companies here. It's what will be probably what the people will see in 20 years. sometimes. When I'm seeing, I will give the general, kind of answer, and then I'll give the example of what we see in terms of our company. So obviously everyone can see and perceive the digital health transformation. Started as revolution. I think it's now evolution. It's a transformation. Obviously the COVID as a tremendous, let's say, accelerator for this acceptance of that. I will go back to that, but I'll go to my specific expertise and my specific company vision. We're in the field of pain. We develop quantification tools that quantify the physiological response to pain. Today, we see 1.5 billion people that suffer from pain every year. And we see, cost of pain soaring. It's more than cancer and diabetes, and we kind of don't even understand that it's there. And we still treat pain as it was hundreds of years ago, subjectively and with smiley faces as a standard of care. I don't see that 20 years from now. I believe that 20 years from now, we will start to manage tools based on quantification, because how can you manage things if you cannot quantify it? So this is where we see, and again, I'm putting the example of medicine and pain, but it can be at the different elements of quantification. So what I see in 20 years, the tools that quantify different physiological phenomena, even that they are now considered subjectively, will be part of the standard of care, will be part of a routine process that physicians look at as a reference to manage better the treatment. Again, in our example, pain, and there are other examples. Many when subjective things will become more quantitative, subjective will still be there, because eventually we are human beings, and the physician role is to treat us as patient and not us as a machine or a biomarker, but it will make things much more quantitative, tangible, and therefore will make things more, let's say, in terms of outcome, improved outcomes. So what I see today as, very early stages clinical, early stages commercialization, will be eventually become 20 years from now something that is standard of care, and we'll say, how can we use smiley faces in the case of pain? So that's my perspective.
Thank you very much for that, Galit. And again, I'm just going based on the order of screens. Boris, we welcome your thoughts.
Okay, thank you. So on the one hand, nothing to add what Galit said regarding the digital approach. At B. Braun, as many people might know, we have a very broad range of portfolio. And I am very happy that we have done investments, for example, in a sequencing business, because I believe that individualized care will in the future be more relevant than today. So prediction of outcome based on your genetic, how to say, situation, but also on the other end, looking at disease management. So not just treating patients with an implant and then let someone else take care of them, rather really having treatment for a patient and having them in a constant disease management, which we can enable looking at all the sensorics that are currently coming into play in implantable devices, for example. And maybe just for treatment of patients, I could imagine that care of patients, so by nurses, and not necessarily defining which indication or which treatment is necessary, but just caring for someone, and I think this is lacking today a lot, will maybe become far more important in the future as these other topics advance.
Thank you for that. Professor Weiss, we welcome your thoughts.
In general, I agree with what was said here, but I would like to start more on a, let's say, strategic looking what's happening currently and how it will reflect on the future in 20 years. So first of all, I think that what we'll see is hospitals will be completely different than they are today. Hospitals will be based on intensive care, and most of the care that today is being given is outpatient clinics in hospitals, or even patients that are hospitalized in the hospital will spend their time at home or will get their services near home. And I think this is one trend that will be very important. And I think part of it, a small part of it, is the digital health. But I think there are other issues that come up, and it was mentioned here, personalized medicine. But I think the developments that are really now beginning of gene therapy, gene editing, and gene engineering will become key. And just this very soon, there will be a Nobel Prize that will be given to the CRISPR developers or identifiers. I think this is really a change because we have in our hands now the possibility not only to prevent diseases by knowing that there's a sequence that is problematic, but we're really touching already to the point that we can edit the genes and change them, either delete them or even correct them. And secondly, I think also that with this goes also our technology in stem cell medicine, where there's a very, very good chance, and this is an area before I became director of the hospital, I was actually researching in. I think there's a very, very good chance that we will be able to ex vivo engineer organs, and instead of looking of a donor for a liver, we'll be able to create outside in a laboratory a liver and transplant it to the patient that has a need for that. So these are extreme changes that are to come, and with this comes also a huge change in our treatment of cancers. I think cancer will become a little bit like AIDS. It will become a long-term chronic disease. We'll be able to manage it, and we won't be talking anymore about lung cancer or liver cancer. We will be talking about the genetic change that was occurred in the cells, and based on that, we will have a panel of treatments that will be directed in order to stop the change that has occurred. Finally, I think that nanotechnology will come in, and people mentioned here all the issues of measuring and intervention. I believe that nanotechnology has a huge impact that will come, and I think this will be also a major change. Finally, AI. AI will become a major player in artificial intelligence, and I think that what we see today is just the early birds of AI. They will become the main drivers in decision making and supporting our decisions in anything we do in medicine, in imaging, and also in managing patients on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Joram. Barak, what are your thoughts as someone who's a CEO of an organization that focuses on investing in companies with devices?
Yes, so I will try to touch it from two different angles, because your initial question was more about the patients, and now you pointed me to the devices, which is indeed our field. So first of all, I think that if we looked on some main trends for 20 years from now, so one of them is preventive medicine. I think we will see more and more wellness versus illness. Treating patient at home, monitoring patient. We'll see more and more sensor at home rather than devices. We will move to personalized medicine, which some of the speakers here already touch upon. And finally, and this is more related to our activity, I think that robotics, AI, and software will be the main driver around devices. And this is the areas that we are looking for because we invest in medical devices. So we look at innovation that will impact this sector. And you can take, for example, a sector like orthopedics, which is a sector that currently see a decline in the number of IP. But the main drivers that will take the market to the future is robotics, is AI surgery, is software surgery. And if you look at the recent acquisition in the field, you see that Medtronic, for example, acquired Mazor Robotics, that we are all familiar with, bringing them into the robotic field. Stryker acquired Mako, again, making them a robotic player. And on the AI and software side, you see acquisition like Medicrea by Medtronic and Brain like Smith and Nephew. So this will be the main driver around surgery. And like I looked at orthopedics, you can look at other sectors that will be much different in the coming years.
Understood. Thank you for that. Omer, I welcome your thoughts from your perspective on the same question.
Hey, thanks. So trying to piggyback on Professor Weiss's kind of initial statement of trying to think strategically what's going to shape how the market would look, rather than trying to maybe specifically target what's healthcare going to look like in 20 years. I think that a few things are going to significantly affect how the market is being shaped. We are a company that is solely focused on digital health. From our perspective, we're seeing the customer experience, or what you might call as consumerism, becoming more and more as a major factor in how healthcare is being served. There are different initiatives all across healthcare of how to emancipate the data from wherever it may reside, whether it's the payers or the providers, and making it more accessible, making the patients more involved in their healthcare, in their decisions. We are developing several products where healthcare is being consumed like you would buy services from Amazon. And we see that as something that's going to strengthen as time goes by. There was some discussion here about kind of personalized medicine, so I won't go into that too much, but obviously the accumulation of data that is happening now, maybe again in AI or maybe other technologies that will come up, but all of the data that is being gathered and what can be done with it and how can we tailor it for better patient experience and outcomes. And finally, I think I foresee a huge innovation that's going to come, given all the technologies that are kind of in play today. AI was already mentioned, cloud technologies, sort of platforms that startups can piggyback into, digitization and so on, that accelerate innovation significantly. And I think that we will see more affordability for healthcare and access. From our side, for medical imaging today, I think about 2/3 of the world do not have access to medical imaging. And today we're seeing innovation like companies like Butterfly, or companies who are developing, which is point of care ultrasound, which can be connected to your cell phone, or whether it's smaller MRI machines, which are portable, but can be moved anywhere. So I think hopefully also the promise of bringing healthcare to remote areas, to people who do not have access to healthcare today, and making it much more affordable.
Thank you for that. And I think that between our panelists, you kind of rounded off a variety of points of view, which included economic, sociological, technical, and medical. Which brings me, I guess, to my next question, which I want to start off specifically with Professor Weiss, because I think in our conversations before the panel, he expressed the most interesting opinion on this point. But one of the aspects that everyone's been talking about, both as a result of COVID-19, in the wake of COVID-19, and in general, is the virtualization of medicine, the remote telemedicine. And, there have been exits in this field to various technologies for various types of medicine. Joram, I'd love your thought, if you could share your thoughts on that with the crowd. I hope they find it as interesting as I did.
The thing is that I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of excitement now with the technologies that allow us basically to do telemedicine. I think that one of the things we discovered is, and for me, it's really not a revelation, but it was actually accentuating what I felt for many, many years. And I should start and say that I'm a big believer in telemedicine, is that it has its limits. And at a certain point, you cannot do everything through a camera, and you cannot do everything through a microphone. And at the end, we need to stay physicians and we need to examine our patients. And I'm saying that because, and the corona is an example for me, the best example in the world, because you discover that physicians tend to believe that they can do everything through a camera and through a microphone. And you discover very quickly that there are major pitfalls that you can fall in. And it's not only related to technology. Some people will tell me, okay, so we'll develop better cameras and we'll develop better microphones and we'll develop all these detection devices from afar. At the end of the day, I think that the human touch will still be very, very important and we shouldn't neglect it. Having said it, as I said before, and here I will surprise you, I'll say also the other part, which is I'm still, having said all that, I'm a big, big, big believer in that. And I should say that many years ago, I actually even published a paper on using data and analyzing data in order to allow telemedicine and to allow analysis from afar. I think that in certain situations, it's the best solution you have. But if you look at really quality of medicine, you need to have the human touch. And unfortunately, physicians, in order to treat patients, have to touch the patient. And not everything can be done from afar, especially if the patient is critically ill, then it's extremely important. And this is my position. And it was just even my understanding of that even was heightened through our belief at the beginning that we can treat all our corona patients. And I was mentioned not to mention corona. So it's the only time I'm mentioning corona, but that we thought that we'll be able to treat our patients that have corona without being in touch with them. And it's impossible. These patients are very complicated. And there you see that when you have a complicated patient, you need to have the nurse and the physician near the bedside. I could talk for an hour, but let's stop here.
Any thoughts from the other panelists?
Yeah.
I can agree with most of the things that Professor Weiss said. I think, telemedicine, I'm also a big believer. I think it will transition the world. On the other hand, I think people that are coming from the medical industry, we understand in some cases you need to be near your physician. We also have, like Omer mentioned, buying stuff on Amazon. So, there is a difference from a device that was approved by the FDA or the CE, or an Apple device, Google device, and things that no one really validate them in the way, or patient as the doctor and Google as the doctors and things like that. So I think all for all, telemedicine and treating patients at home and monitoring them is very important. On the other hand, it's still a business for professionals, so some things need to be done in the old-fashioned way.
I want to. Can I refer to that?
Please.
Or Omer, you first. So I think that telemedicine is one aspect of that. It's combining telecommunication to give information. By definition, it's limited, as you say, to voice, what we see, what we see and what we hear. We miss all the other senses that the physician has and using it. So first, that's the definition of the problem. This is something that can be solved in a certain way. Provide tools that give more of the other senses that the physician has. So telemedicine by itself, it's not the full solution. The second thing is the intuition. And I'm using the word intuition because physicians, basically after years of experience, develop in their minds the understanding of how to analyze, how to diagnose what is the right treatment. So physicians that were trained and work with standard tools, now you take them the tools, so the whole brain works differently. So you really need to go through a whole process of learning the mindset in terms of how to treat in different settings. So this is why telemedicine will take time to get to better, let's say, performances compared to where we are today. But still today, again, with the basic things that you can do with seeing and hearing, basically, with understanding that it's limit in terms of efficiency, accessibility, availability, it's amazing. But it needs to be with the notion that there might be mistakes and need to be well monitored. So that's my fault.
Boris and Omer, I believe you both wanted to say something.
Yes, indeed. And the longer you wait, the more has been said that I can only agree to. But I think it's a very important and topic to do the first assessment of a patient, and then really saying, is it something that can be done just virtually, or do you need to see the patient, or is it another physician that should see the patient? And I think that can be a big relief for many healthcare systems as this initial topic. Where it goes from there and how things evolve and improve, and how also the physicians' intuition based on this type of treatment improves, we will see. But I think that's taking like the first examination or direction of the patient away already helps a lot. I think in Switzerland this was very successful in
Maybe to add two anecdotes to what has already been said. One, if you look at it from the patient side, I think we need to realize we're different. We're dealing with different patients or consumer populations. The younger people are going to expect to consume healthcare in a more virtual way and in a more telemedicine way, let's say that. And we see many innovation around that, whether it's mental health or bots, virtual assistants, whatever it might be, who are providing initial assistance or some sort of medical assistance. And again, it is driven by the consumer and their how they expect to consume healthcare. And from the physician standpoint, I just think we need to realize that there are challenges that are being created from dealing or treating patients through telemedicine. And I think I talked to several GPs who, on the one hand, have become much more productive because they can treat patients whenever they want. It's mostly coming through emails. They don't have to listen to their whole family story along the way, so they're much more productive. But on the other hand, they have no idea who's talking to them, who's asking for what, and they're completely lose sight of kind of the patient history. And I think through that, what we're going to find out is going to be, again, new innovation startups that are going to rise, that are going to be dealing with these issues or with these challenges that are arising. So again, I think it's a bit tough for all of us to kind of imagine exactly what it's going to look like, because we're not going to have the same tools as we have today. So right now, we're mostly dealing maybe with access. That is kind of where the industry is today, providing better access. The next step is going to be, how do we provide better data, better information for the caregivers to be able to do their job better. So for all of you who are looking for innovation, I think this is kind of where innovation is going.
Please, Boris.
The question that comes to my mind, and also referring to what Professor Weiss said at the beginning, with more ambulatory treatment and people at home or patients at home, where's the social and emotional aspect of treatment going? Are we missing patients? Are we missing this very important part of treatment? And how do we overcome that? It can't be this little cuddling thing that you take in elderly care homes, I guess. And I don't have an answer. So
I think it's a very, very good question.
Yeah, there is no one solution for all. It might fit to certain segments, certain aspects of the medicine, and be great because it will download and will reduce the overload on the system on that aspect, and allow maybe to better treatment with the aspect that really needs the human touch, human response, and that currently, by the way, today might not be addressed because of the overload on the system. So again, it's probably segmentation and finding the right solution to the right, let's say, scenarios or the right diseases, states, conditions. So
exactly, maybe it's just more options that patients have now, depending on their state and their preferences, that will be available to them.
And
so, sorry, please.
If I may say, I fully agree with one issue that was brought here. When I was addressing the issue of telemedicine today, let's be frank, it's pretty primitive. I agree completely with the human touch, and I agree also with the fact that we need to touch and see, and we need to smell. But speaking of technologies, I believe that in the future, we will be able to develop technologies that will, say, quote unquote, make us smell and feel things that today seem very, very far away, that we won't be able, that it's difficult to understand. But I believe that an artificial nose and an artificial touch is possible to be obtained in the future, through robotics, by the way, or other technologies. So I think that, having said whatever I said with my reservations, I want to make it very clear that I'm a big believer in the future of telemedicine, especially for remote regions where really the access for medicine is very limited, and there it can be extremely important.
I completely agree. I keep thinking we have a client, a professor out at the Technion who specializes in technology around the olfactory sense, and being able to transmit smells. So it's something that's definitely in the works. So my next question, which is something that a few of you mentioned by reference, we all have a fairly good idea of what it is that we're doing or what it is that we're good at. And at the drop of a hat at any of these panels, you will hear words like AI and analysis and virtualization. And these are clearly things on which the industry as a whole is focused, and specifically Israel has a lot of companies and a lot of resources devoted to them. So my question to the panelists is the opposite. Which fields, which disciplines, which life science technologies do you feel we're neglecting? We're falling behind on, both in the general sense of the industry and more specifically, if you have a view about the market here in Israel. I mean, you can volunteer, or I'll just pick one. But Professor Weiss, thank you for that. I think you're on mute. Sorry.
I'm volunteering because as you mentioned at the beginning, I'm somewhat very interested in technologies here in Israel, and I'm involved also not only as a physician in a hospital and director of a hospital, but I'm also consulting to companies, and I have a lot of projects that come through me. And one of the issues that I have a feeling, and it will be very interesting to hear from the panelists, which are much more involved with the industry, but my feeling is that anything that is related to nanotechnology here in Israel, we are behind. We're very good at computer technologies, we're very good at pharmaceuticals, at developing stem cell technologies. I'm well acquainted with what's happening in my institution, also commercialization. My gut feeling is that for some reason here in Israel, which I have also a sense why it happens, is that anything that is related to nanotechnologies, Israel is falling behind. And I think it's a big, big problem for the country, because I truly believe that nanotechnologies are a very important part, not only for the future of medicine, but also the future of the economy in general. And that's my understanding, and I would be very happy to hear that I'm wrong in my gut feeling that I just mentioned.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else? Yes, Omer, please.
Yeah. So maybe it's not exactly what you were intending for. I'm not going to talk about specifically about areas of medicine, but maybe from what we're seeing, I think an area that is completely, I would say, neglected is more the IT side of the house, the infrastructure, where we are seeing the healthcare system globally. It's not just Israel or US. I think it's an issue we're seeing globally. The infrastructure which healthcare is being served of. I think none of us want to know that some sort of a monitor that is giving us care is already 7 years old, and it's a computer like any computer you're using. I know all of us are aware of the massive cyber attacks on hospitals and the effect of it on the exposure of patient data, the effect of it on the ability to provide care because systems can be completely shut down. And I think there is a huge oversight on that area, lack of investment, and also, unfortunately, lack of knowledge on hospital sides how to manage IT systems. which is at the end of the day affecting healthcare.
Boris, please.
I would like to emphasize this second one, and not just IT systems, but rather the process optimization within hospitals. A lot of secondary processes, not the patient flow, but processes around that. So resource planning and things like that are neglected, and there's a lot of or many things there. I haven't seen so many startups in this area and starting to tackle these problems. But maybe because of the unwillingness of hospitals to invest in such important areas, or the inability.
Interesting. Galit, Barak, if you don't have any thoughts on this specific issue, I'll jump ahead to what I think is my last question, because we have about 8 minutes until we run out of time, and some of you do have a hard stop. So my last question is based roughly on strategy games on my iPhone. If you play strategy games, you always have the ability to spend a few coins and do a rush job of whatever development you want to be doing, like your armory or whatever. So my question to you, gentlemen, is as follows. If you were able to spend some sort of imaginary virtual coin and accelerate the development of any medical technology that's currently in the works by a decade, what would you spend those magic chips on? Which technology do you think needs to take priority and mankind or us as a whole would benefit most from if we could accelerate that development by a decade? And I love the way everyone kind of looked up and started smiling and going like, oh, okay, hang on, I got this. So please, Joram.
It's very difficult to say which one is the one, but if you ask me when it comes, I'm leaving now the system and I'm going to the patient, which will really bring the biggest benefit to humankind is if we can master the issue of gene editing and stem cell therapy for the benefit of our patients, because this is really the contribution that can increase the longevity. We increased significantly over the past 50, 60 years the longevity of people. Remember, at the end of the Second World War, people were dying at the medium age that we were living was 65. Today here in Israel, we're talking about 82, 83, and even 84 now. And it's increasing. So the next step for longevity, which will allow us to really manage diseases that are and make them chronic diseases, long-term diseases, is the ability to edit genes and to do gene editing and using stem cells to cure. So from my point of view, this is what you call also personalized medicine. This is where for the human, for the person, this will be the biggest benefit for the health system, because also it will increase the productivity. And I'm looking now also the fact that instead of a patient spending time and getting chemotherapy, which throws them in a bed and he's completely out of work for days, you take people with a chronic disease and you allow them to stay at home, you allow them to continue to work and to contribute to society. So for all these reasons, I think that personalized medicine is really the important part when it comes to where we should invest in medicine. All the others, including nanotechnology, which is, by the way, can be part of personalized medicine, but also can be part of what some people have mentioned, and this is the monitoring and advanced monitoring, everything else. From my point of view, this is something that supports the personalized medicine and supports the ability to improve the standard of living of patients that have disease. So this is my personal view, and it's personal, and everybody can disagree about that, but I think this is the way I look at it.
Please. Omer, and by the way,
Okay.
there's also a question in the chat around one of the issues we touched upon earlier, which is Henry is asking, how do we create the IT infrastructure network needed for healthcare innovation? Which I think you kind of touched upon in your last response.
Yeah.
So
So I'll try to talk about both of them. So I think where we need to spend more dollars on is on the digitization of healthcare. I think you'll still be amazed at how much of the current processes are manual, driven by people, how much back and forth we're having, how difficult it is to access data. If you want to take just your CT images and transfer them, how difficult it is. So being able to digitize the data and make it more accessible for better patient healthcare and better, again, being able to share it with whoever you want, whether it's different hospital physicians or whoever. And to answer the question about the IT infrastructure, I think we're going towards cloud technologies. I don't believe hospitals have the infrastructure or the knowledge to manage the IT infrastructure over time. And what we're seeing in healthcare is double down investment on the cloud technology. It's a very big investment, but strategic players are making that investment.
Galit, I believe you had.
Yeah. Well, personally, I flipped the coin and decided to invest in pain and AI with my company. The nice thing is that there are different answers to this question, and this is why different companies, different disciplines are developing and helping us, because we're not binary. It's not just one solution fits all. And I decided to focus on pain because, again, pain will be, even when we get to perfect, gene solution, a personalized, it's part of who we are and how our body protects itself. And it's part of what we need to deal as human beings. So I think it's all over the place, and the different elements, I think it needs to be addressed, again, in different perspectives. Specifically, the way that I could see how we can help is looking at from the perspective of quantification and using AI, because it's too complicated just to come with an equation. We are more developed than that. In the general form, I think that as long as we understand that, again, whatever solution that is coming for any disease, there will be development, there will be other side effects, there will be other conditions, and we acknowledge that there is need to treat this. Again, pain is one example, but side effects of other elements are other examples. I think this is important to continue and be aware of that those side effects, or this element of the thing that shouldn't be part of, it's just the second element of cancer or second element of any disease, it should be considered and treated and invested.
Boris, please.
So I think both coins are well spent, but it will take a time to get there. For personalized medicine, probably a bit longer. So I think I would spend my coin on bioelectronic medicine, because I believe that we can really improve the treatment of patients if we specifically trigger, for example, autonomous body functions instead of using drugs all over the patient.
A very cool answer. Thank you, Barak.
Yes, so in almost on the same line. For me, one area that we haven't spoken a lot today is the interaction between device and drugs and monitoring to have the entire sequence. So I see in the future a situation when on one hand you will have a sensor or implantable device that will monitor the patient situation, and then you have specific drug that will be for specific patient according to their conditions. So, and in that way, I think it will be very important for future medicine.
Well, I think those were really some amazing answers, and certainly a few that I didn't expect. And I think we've ran our allotted time. I personally had a great time, and I really enjoyed speaking to each and every one of the panelists. And I think each one of you contributed the fresh perspective from their own background. If anyone has anything they'd like to wrap up with, I'm happy to open the floor for anyone to kind of say a few words. But it's been a pleasure hosting you. It's been a pleasure talking about what you think medicine is going to be like in 20 years, what we should be speeding up, and what we may have been neglecting. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much.